legislation was introduced this week by several members of Congress to finally make the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico a state. The bill's introduction comes after a referendum this past November where over 50% of Puerto Rico's residents voted in favor of statehood. Because they're not a state, the 3.2 million Americans in Puerto Rico lack full voting representation in Congress and also cannot vote for the president. Advocacy for statehood has grown over the past 3 years following Hurricane Maria's destruction on the island, which exposed Puerto Rico's vulnerable position as a U.S. territory and its lack of resources. However, there are many opponents of statehood who feel like it would rob the island of its identity and that independence may be a better option. So ladies, I'm curious, what are your thoughts of the support for the statehood?
What do you say? You say become a state, or you say don't become a state?
No, I say become a state. I think it's important. For so long, I think people thought, Puerto Rico, do I need a passport? Puerto Rico, Trump, after the hurricane, was throwing paper towels, and he was like, I spoke to the president. I spoke to the president of Puerto Rico. Hello, that was you.
You are the president.
He didn't know. People don't know. And I think it would be important. Also, it would be the first state of color, which I think that would be amazing, that the majority of the people in the state are of color.
So this is my concerns. I have the same concerns that Jeannie just listed. Obviously, my mom being Puerto Rican and our family being in Puerto Rico, there's certain issues like the fact that we fight in wars, but we can't vote. That is an issue for me. I absolutely believe that we should have the right to vote in Puerto Rico, especially when we on the front lines, just like everyone else fighting for this country, for their independence, for so many other things, how we protect the independence of this country. So that's one issue. Two, I also recognize the major concern of losing our culture. Obviously, so much of Puerto Rico has become somewhat Americanized. It's already, you land and there's McDonald's. It has become, there are super Americanized things about it. But then I look to places like Hawaii, and I recognize how they actually have been able to maintain a large part of their culture. So I'd be really curious to talk to like Hawaiians and actually ask them what their perspective is. Because while I may think, oh, it's so cultural, Aulani Disney, they may feel completely different about it. So I'd love to actually speak to real people who have experienced something like this with that transition. And then last but not least, I really have an issue with the idea, I'm afraid that the expectation is going to be underwhelming, in the sense that they're going to be underwhelmed when they actually get the reality versus what they expect. In the sense that, oh, we're going to become a state. Look at Texas, what Texas just went through with the ice and not being, with snow and not being able to have power in their homes. Look at Flint, Michigan, that still doesn't have safe water. Like,
But what does that have to do with them being a state?
I don't want their expectation to be like, everything is going to change overnight because now we're a state, so we'll get the resources that we need. Flint, Michigan can't even get the resources that they need. Texas couldn't get the resources it needed in power when there was no power. It's terrible. There's bad things that happen. So I would hate for them to lose any part of their culture. I would hate for things to change in that sense, the things that people are fearing will happen, and then they don't get what they thought was going to be given to them. Do you understand what I'm saying? Where you think, I come to America, everything's going to be better, and then nothing changes.
Expectations definitely have to be managed, and I think we're all unanimously agreeing that our country has so much to work on, and just because you become part of the statehood does not mean at all that your problems are solved.
It's
but
terrible.
I don't think that franchising has to do with. I don't think that that's a fault of. I don't think that would happen as you become a part of the American state. Like franchises happen. That's business ownership and whether or not you can afford that as a business owner to go and put franchises up. And actually,
people feel that way. I'm just speaking on the part of how Puerto Ricans feel. People felt that way when they became a Commonwealth. They already felt like, a lot changed. Malls were put up. People started investing money. It absolutely changed some of what it originally was. So I think people just don't want it to become.
There's an opposing bill, AOC and another Puerto Rican Democrat, that they're not vying for statehood. They really want Puerto Ricans to decide. And that's where I
Me
stand.
too.
I think Puerto Ricans should be able to decide if they want
Absolutely.
statehood or if they want independence. And the thing is that while that is happening, they're still Americans, and we should still hold them as Americans. And basically,
exactly.
what you have to do is use
100%.
Alaska and Hawaii as examples of how they
Yeah.
wanted to statehood. And then I think that would help the Puerto Rican people, but it's ultimately their decision. I don't think
Yes.
it's for us to really do it. It's
Right.
their country, it's their
Yeah.
state. Let them decide it, do
collaborative
a vote,
vote.
do whatever they need to do
Yeah.
that, and they, we wish
Agree.
them well. But we still
Agree.
need to take care of them as Americans.
Yes.
So
100%.
that's it.
Absolutely.